playing the wrong tune in the wrong key. Gig nightmares for you and me. Song changed keys and I wasn't ready. Gig nightmares for you and me. Another key change, oh God, oh no. Gig nightmares for you and me. All right, Gig Nightmares. Today we have a special guest. We have Mr. Mark Briody, guitarist and co-founder of legendary heavy metal band Jag Panzer. Now, according to Facebook, you are also an otter enthusiast, stamp collector, and appraiser of antique thimbles.
None of
those. Correct? Perfect. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
So, I've unfortunately never gotten to see Jag Panzer live. I remember you guys played at Sellersville Theater in 2018, but at that point I was still in high school and I didn't have my own car, and hitchhiking didn't seem like a good idea. But fortunately, you guys are playing later this year in Brooklyn at Rage of Armageddon. So very excited to see the show then.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's with Ed. He's a great promoter.
Awesome. So I reached out to you because, well, we're friends on Facebook, but I saw some of your posts just talking about things, that kind of fall in line with the topic of this show, Gig Nightmares. I remember I messaged you because one of the stories you posted was about having to sneak into your own gig.
Yeah, that was this last tour in Munich. They had it's a big venue. They have several different rooms and they have full-on security at every door. And the guy said, look, I can't let you in. I realize you're in the band, but I have my orders, and my orders are no one gets in without credentials, even if you're in the band. But everybody in our band, we know how to sneak in venues pretty good. We've been doing it since we were kids, so I found a secret back door and got in there and knew the back door where my bandmates were, so I just went and knocked on that. Yeah, I wasn't getting in otherwise. We had tons of things happen. We had, like in Spinal Tap, where they can't find the stage, we'd had that happen. We were playing in Germany, and we were playing. They have, especially in the eastern part of Germany, they have a lot of these older buildings that are huge. They're a multi-purpose building. They may have 3 theaters in there, some classrooms, a lecture hall. And we were playing in one of those, and the dressing room was, it was 2 levels up, but it was confusing because there was like half a stairs, and then you go, and then another half a stairs, and a couple weird turns, and we could not find our way back to the stage. I mean, we kept looping around, and we finally found someone who didn't speak English, but we sort of, I guess he got the impression we were lost. And we followed him, and he took us to the wrong place at first, but then he eventually got us to the hall.
I mean, you eventually got there. So I was reading something you posted at one point was doing like a stress test rehearsal. And that's something I've done that a bunch of times, but I don't see too many people doing it. For people who aren't aware of it, can you describe a little bit about what your stress test rehearsals are like?
Oh, that could be anything. That could be not hearing somebody else and having to play through the set, having to play through the set where a drummer's just hitting a phone book so you can barely hear it, playing the set while you're looking the other way. It's just anything to get you out of the realm of a perfect environment, because bands tend to have perfect environments in the rehearsal room because you keep fine-tuning it every day, but you are not going to get that live. So we like to, do rehearsals where it may be as difficult as possible, but if you can get through it, it really helps you.
Sure. With the old band I used to be in, the singer would turn off the lights and have like laser machines and everything going.
Oh,
so,
cool.
You would try to hit your pedal board and it would be impossible, but I love it. It's a fun challenge.
Yeah, anything plus, like to challenge yourself. It prepares you.
Sure. And I remember another one of your posts saying sometimes you sneak up behind band members and then just scream and to try to startle them and throw them off.
Yeah, it was funny some of the comments I got about, oh, we play too loud. Come on, there's the laws of physics and sound disbursement. Yeah, I crank my amp up loud, but if you go off axis of it, if you're in the middle of the stage and the drummer is just playing a basic beat, you can yell in someone's ear. Yeah, I like to try to throw Ken off. He's our other guitar player. Yeah, he's my favorite victim. I just will scream anything in him. Weird movie quotes. He's right in the middle of a difficult solo, and I went up to him and said, "You're going to need a bigger boat."
That's awesome. Um, so I play in a 80s tribute band, so we're playing like a lot of like, pretty much greatest hits of the
Oh,
80s,
cool.
most like poppy or sort of stuff. And a lot of time, like I've been in that band for close to 2 years, so like just hearing a lot of the same songs, you try changing the lyrics and whatever, making them as vulgar as possible.
Yep.
For example, like we do Freeze Frame by Jay Giles Band, and I think the opening line is like, I could see it was a rough cut Tuesday, but me and so my 80s tribute band, there's 3 female lead singers, and 2 of them are also in their 20s like me. So we all just have, terrible sense of humor. So like if they're singing, I'll just like look at them and I'll just like either mouth it or just try yelling it to them instead of saying, I could see it was a rough cut Tuesday. I'll say something like, I could see it was a butt fuck Tuesday. And then just like try to get them just like explode with laughing, Can you still get through the show?
Yeah, it keeps everybody on their
and then
toes.
like we were doing
Yeah, I think it does.
Yep, exactly.
It's unexpected, it's fresh, and yeah, it keeps us focused. We'll flip each other off on stage, and
I think I remember like the classic example. I think it was Alice in Chains opening for Van Halen in the 90s. And I think it was like the last date of the tour where I think Alice in Chains, I think like they all just like ran out on stage like in like either in like underwear or like bizarre outfits or something, just trying to throw them off.
Yeah, that's great.
Is there any other stuff like that you guys do on stage?
Oh, we've had crazy unintentional. That same tour at Sellersville you were talking about, we played another venue. Trying to remember where it was. There was a hole in the stage, and all of a sudden our bass player disappears. I mean, it was a 4-foot hole, and there's a video of it that he posts online. It's hilarious because he's playing, and it looks like a magic trick because he is just gone in an instant.
Oh, so I was listening to a few other podcast interviews you've done over the years, just like trying to see if there were like any interesting stories to bring up of just like bizarre things. Because I mean, that's kind of the point of the show. Just like what's all the stuff that happens that people don't really realize or they don't hear about. I don't remember which podcast it was, but at some point you mentioned back when the band was called Tyrant in the early days, when you guys were about to do the Tower of Darkness demo, and you go to the studio and you find out, okay, we don't have the money for that. So some of the band members, if I remember correctly, had to go donate blood to get money for that.
Oh yeah, I was the one driving, so I drove them straight to the blood donation center. We're all from a we grew up in a really poor neighborhood. It's one of the poorest in Colorado. So giving blood for money was fairly common. I don't think my band members had ever done it, but we all knew about it. But yeah, I picked him up. I was the only one that had a car. I had just beat up junky car I bought, I think, for $150. And I said, "You guys got your money?" "Nope." "Okay, heading to the blood donation. We got enough time to donate blood before the session." I mean, looking back, it was crazy. You're giving blood before you go play, but we had the time booked and needed the money. I think I was the only one that had the money. I think everybody else had to give blood.
But now I'm wondering, like, when, because like normally after like giving blood, you're pretty exhausted. Right. So like, how does that affect your playing then? Like, are you weakened or does it give you more adrenaline because you're pretty much fighting for your life while playing?
Yeah, I think we were 16 and 17, and the adrenaline was so hyped up because this was our first time in the studio. So I think everybody got through it. Nowadays, yeah, we couldn't do it. I don't think.
So I also I was reading somewhere that Ample Destruction was recorded with just 8 tracks. Is that correct?
No, the first EP was 8 tracks. Ample Destruction was 16 track, and it wasn't the
Okay.
big fat 16 track. It was Tascam 16 track. I mean, it was, that was decent technology for back then. But yeah, that's all we had. And we don't live in a small city. We live in a fairly decent place. But back then, there was no 24 track studios here. You'd have had to go to Denver, and I think there's maybe 2 of them up there, and they were way out of our price range.
I remember it's in one of the interviews you mentioned that the band moved to Southern California for about 5 months, but one of the biggest issues was that most of the bands out there, with all the I guess record label support and everything, were just on a different level, at least financially, and were able to do like more stage show sort of stuff.
Yeah, everybody we saw,
And then it
everybody had full stacks, light shows, and yeah, it was either record company, rich dad. It was always an angle to have money, and we had nothing. I mean, it was all of us living in a little house, and yeah, we tried to get some gigs, and some of the club owners, they would talk to us because they saw we had the record out and we were getting some press, but when we told them we didn't have the full stacks and the light show, that shut all the doors. So we couldn't even get a show out there.
so knowing that there was that sort of, I guess, rough times in the initial, iteration of the band in the 80s, how exactly did the, I guess, rebirth and just upward rise from the 90s onward happen? How would you describe that in your own words?
We just loved doing this so much that we just kept pressing forward, and we always had this just unwavering belief in our music. When Ample came out, the reviews were fairly lukewarm initially, and we only had a deal for the States, so we tried getting a European deal. We're turned down by everybody, and I wrote all the labels back and said, I will give you this album for free. Just release it. And, the answer was still no. We just kept pressing forward. So Ample caught on about 4 years later, and then it was reissued everywhere. And yeah, we always had little events happen that would kind of fuel the next thing coming up. So the reissues of Ample, that got us writing more new material and kind of trying to move forward that way. So there was always some way. Well, not always. There was a time period about 11 years ago was about the only time that there wasn't anything moving us forward. But other than that, it's like a carrot on a stick in front of a mule or something you used to see in movies. It was just always some little incentive to keep going. But we like it. We like playing metal, doing gigs, the whole thing.
It's awesome. I'm just personally impressed with, I mean, again, just like hearing, I guess, somewhat of like the limited response in the 80s, but then just seeing, well, decades later, like, pretty much from like the 2000s onwards, seeing like all the different, like, let's say, festival appearances, like, playing Wacken a bunch of times, playing Sweden Rock, Bang Your Head. It's very inspiring, especially like, coming from a guitar player like myself. It's very inspiring to see.
Oh, thank you.
Another question I have, throughout the course of the band's history, there's been a few notable alumni who have come through the band. Well, first with Harry singing for Riot in the late 80s. That's pretty awesome. And then obviously Chris Broderick being in the band and going on to join Megadeth. Has the presence of having those, the two of them playing in other big notable bands, has that been, I guess, a good thing for the band, bringing more people to become fans of the music, or not really?
Yeah, not as much as you would think. I mean, guys like Chris Broderick were so incredible to work with. That guy was, I'm not sure I ever heard him make a mistake on the guitar. He was just an incredible and just a cool guy and a hard worker. And yeah, so we were happy he got the Megadeth gig. I mean, that was such a big step up, but I don't think it brought really that much of an audience to us. I'd get the occasional people, maybe 1 out of 20 at gigs, because we always go talk to the audience after we play. So yeah, for a while it was maybe one person a gig that would say, I started checking you out because I heard Megadeth. So yeah, there was some, but I thought we expected, I guess, a little bit more, but that didn't happen.
It's interesting to me. I was speaking with Jimmy Waldo from Alcatraz a little while ago.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, while I was doing research for that, I found out that Clive Burr from Iron Maiden, after leaving Iron Maiden in 82, 83, whichever year it was, he actually auditioned for Alcatraz and was
with
them,
yeah.
jamming with them for about a week or two. Yep, exactly. To me, I hear that and think, whoa, drummer from Iron Maiden is playing in this band? Like that, to me, if I heard that back in the day, I would have been, oh, that's awesome. I want to go check out this record, this CD, etc. But he was saying also pretty much the same sort of thing, that he doesn't think, at least instrumentalists, it doesn't really matter to most people who's actually playing on the album. And I mean, I'm personally confused by that, being a musician, but it also kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
In some ways.
I was always personally interested. It was funny with the Alcatraz, because I wanted to hear him. Clive Burr's playing for him. I want to hear him. And then somebody told me, no, Barrymore Barlow. Oh, well, he's from Jethro Tull. Now I also want to hear them. But yeah, I tend to be an oddball with stuff like that. And the best thing to look at, I guess, is, Steve Harris with British Lion, who I really like British Lion. They're a great band, but they have a fraction of what Iron Maiden draws. So I don't think a lot of Iron Maiden fans are coming out to see British Lion, which I guess that's kind of a shame, because I think they're a great band.
It is kind of strange, though. I mean, especially like a band on the level of Iron Maiden, playing arenas, more or less selling out arenas around the world, but then British Lion just playing like, maybe 1,200 person clubs.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's cool for, the diehard fans that want to be experiencing that sort of thing and being, 10 feet away from Steve Harris. But at the same time, it's surprising.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, something I was also wondering, just on the topic of, fans going to see certain bands just based on certain members. I was wondering if like metal fans would be a bit more dedicated in terms of things like that, because like pretty much anytime I go see a show and I'm hanging out afterwards, there's someone talking about, oh, have you heard this record? Have you heard this new side project? And it does seem like at least a lot of the people I talk to do seem to be interested in, who's playing on which album and who joined which band. So I'm wondering, like, is it really more of a metal thing where there's just loyalty to individual? I mean, I wasn't around, for the 70s, obviously, but like when everyone was obsessed with Kiss and thinking, oh, it's those 4 guys. Okay, now it's these different 4 guys, and where everyone knew every member of the band. Does that same sort of thing still exist, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're seeing less and less of it. Yeah, it definitely exists more in metal. It also exists a lot in prog rock. I like bands like, Marillion, Fish, and I know I see a lot of the crossover. Like I'll talk to people that like Fish. That's the FISH, not the PH band. And people always bring up that, wow, Iron Maiden's guitar player is on this Fish record. And I'm like, right, he's on Vigil in the Wilderness of Mirrors. And so there are, and those are something I picked up on, and also my prog friends will pick up on that. So I think that's the 2 genres where people are still reading, who plays on the record or who's the guest musician. In this instance, it's Yannick Gears, on the Fish record, and of course in Iron Maiden.
I actually was not aware of that guest. I need to go find that out.
Oh, that's a great album.
Yeah, my drummer's a huge Marillion fan, and he's slowly getting me into it. We're going to go see the shows up in Montreal later this year.
Oh, cool.
In March.
Yeah, I love Marillion and Fish. Absolutely. Huge fan.
It's awesome. Who would you, I know you're big into the British wave of, new wave of heavy metal, as some of the best guitar work music out there. Who are some more of your influences, and are you listening to any more modern bands now?
Oh, I'm one of the biggest Kate Bush fans on the planet. I mean, I
Wow.
love Kate Bush.
All right.
I mean, she's a genius. I still listen to Prince regularly. You know, he's passed away several years ago, but I still dig out my Prince albums regularly. I think he's an incredible musician. Um, Peter Gabriel, you know, both his solo and with Genesis. Um, I like a lot of Celtic punk, Dropkick Murphys, Flatfoot 56. What is the name of the band that has Fastway's old singer singing for him? Flogging Molly.
Flogging
Yeah.
Molly. Yep.
I like classic punk, Circle Jerks, Dead Kennedys. I like heavier classical music like Mussorgsky, Wagner, like movie soundtrack composers like Basil Polidorus. I just listen to music all day. I'm at least 8 hours a day of playing music.
I think it's very important to have a wide range of influences, especially, you know, in the process of creating new things, you know, creating music, film, anything like
Yeah.
that. Because otherwise, else, if you're just coming pretty much from one source, it's probably going to end up sounding more or less like the thing that you listen to, which, I mean, in some cases, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I mean, I love Rainbow, but I then end up loving most of what Yngwie's done on his solo records because there's a lot of Rainbow influence in there. But at the same time, I mean, obviously, Yngwie may not be the best example since, like, he's obviously, like, innovated a lot with, you know, the guitar playing and everything and more of the classical influence. But then if someone were to just do like the same thing over and over again, it probably wouldn't be all that interesting, which is why I think it's important for artists to keep trying to grow and, you know, find new things to enjoy, you know, take inspiration from.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny you mentioned Rainbow. I mean, I'm a giant Rainbow fan, and I'm always afraid we'll write occasional songs, and I'll think, maybe that sounds a bit much like Rainbow, but nobody ever catches on, and nobody's ever said that to any of our songs. So we're going, okay, so I'll just keep writing them.
I'm going to have to listen closer then. So do you have anything else related to gig nightmares? You know, anything that comes to mind? Any stories?
Yeah, I took a bunch of notes. Let me, oh, come on. Let me get my phone back. Yeah, we got a bunch of gig nightmares. A few things right out of Spinal Tap, like the getting lost in the building I talked about. In Spinal Tap, they had the in-store where no one showed up. We had a radio
Yep.
station meet and greet where one person showed up. They said it was warm and they were going to have it outside. And they said, we're going to get 200 to 300 people, one person. It was so fun though. He was a cool guy, but yeah, that was very Spinal Tap. Like, there's going to be a bunch of people out here, and there was one. But we had a tour gig once years ago that made up for that. We were playing a gig, and there's like 8 people there, and we were going, wow, this is not that big a crowd, but let's just make it, you know, we'll play to whoever, you know, it's fun. So it was a good gig, and we opened up the front door, and there's like 400 people outside. And they asked, well, why did you play a private gig? And I said, I had no idea it was a private gig. We're just booked and we show up. So that was cool seeing all those people outside listening. So that was sort of the revenge for the one person meet and greet. Spinal Tap had the wireless, the signals interfering with the wireless. We had one gig where I was picking up CB radio on my wireless. You know, it's in between the songs, and we hear 10-4, good buddy. There any bears there? 10-4. What's your handle? It's just like all the time. So I finally had to unplug it. One gig, I wanted to look cool and jump over the drum riser, but my guitar cord was too short and it was wrapped around, and it just pulled me down, and I just landed on my face on the drum riser.
Oh.
That was terrible. We were touring Europe, and it was the last night of the tour, and I'm checking my backing vocals, and I said to the sound man, Richard, hey, I'm not plugged in. And he goes, well, yeah, we unplugged you 1 minute into the first song of the first night. I said, what do you mean we? Oh, well, your band members, were giving me faces during that first song that you're singing kind of sucks. And so I listened and yeah, I agreed. So I pulled it, but you look really into it. So we've been letting you think you're singing this whole tour. And I'm like, wow, thanks, guys.
Jeez.
We played in Paris and we showed up in the marquee said Jag Panzer. And it's like, come on, how do you get our name that wrong? Jag Panzer tonight. We rented a van once for a gig, and the van rental place, the van they gave us had expired plates. So we got pulled over by the cops. And he decided, oh, you're a metal band, you must have drugs. So not only did we get dinged for the plates, which weren't our fault, we had to take all the gear out and they searched everything. It was horrible.
It's funny. That makes you the second person I'm interviewing who's had that same issue. Except the person I interviewed before was touring with the Drifters. Under the boardwalk,
yeah.
And they actually did have drugs. So,
and we had the usual thing all bands go through at some time. Trying to get paid and people not paying you, and thankfully, once you get an agent, that doesn't happen anymore. So that's knock on wood, a thing of the past. We've had fist fights in the studio. It was horrible. Mic stands flying, and yeah, we've had about everything. Everything happened to us.
but still going strong 44 years later.
Yeah, it's fun. I really like it. I like to meet people at the gigs because I'm meeting people from other countries and different cultures and different experiences. Meeting people I've got to know online. There's always someplace new when we're on tour. Like this last tour in November, we got to Croatia. We'd never been there, so that was cool seeing Croatia. We drove across Slovenia, so that was nice seeing Slovenia. So it's always good seeing some places, and you get to hang out with your buddies, and you get to play live. So all good.
That's awesome. But especially like going back to like the fan experience that you guys really just go above and beyond from everything I see online. With the giveaway, like sure, like bands throw out guitar picks, but like the extra level that you do, giving out picks, giving out pick tins, dog tags, the wristbands, having autograph cards for fans that don't have anything to get signed. Like, I mean, when I see the show, I'm going to buy something, but at least when I look at I like collecting vinyl, but every store I go to, I don't know if I've ever seen like a Jag Panzer record on vinyl before. I'm sure I could order one online, but like it's just not a very common sort of thing, and I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that. So like, having something like the autograph cards, it's an extra step of just showing that you guys really care about the fans, and it's awesome to see.
Oh, thank you. That comes from when I was a teenager. I had a fake ID, so I was out seeing bands since I was 15. And one of the bands I saw, and a lot of them were not cool to me because these were guys who were probably 21 and 22, and they wanted to talk to girls, not a 15-year-old guy. But because I was always curious about, why do you have your amp set like that? I was curious about everything. So the one band that really was cool was called The Offenders, and that had Randy Castile on drums that later went to play for Ozzy, and Randy Rand on bass that played for Autograph. Those guys were great. They would take the time, answer every question, show me things. Like I asked Randy Castile, why do you have your cymbals at that angle? It was a little different angle than I saw from other drummers. And he goes, oh, well, come back here. We went behind his kit, and he's showing me how he hits. So that just made me enjoy the Offenders play much more than these other bands. So that sort of got in my head about the fan experience is important. And I was always the kid growing up that was go to the front row trying to catch guitar picks. So we were doing that since day one, throwing out guitar picks, and we thought, well, how can we take this up to the next level? So we've always had these dog tags, and they're nice dog tags. They're like a embossed brass, and they look good. And I just asked the other guys, let's give them away after each gig. I mean, we got a whole big box of them, so we started doing that. And the autograph cards were from the tour before, because people would come up to me and have me sign napkins because they said it was a digital ticket. So I thought, okay, well, how can we make this fan experience better? So that's when we came up with the autograph card. So that they actually went pretty well. So we signed a ton of them on the tour. So yeah, our goal is to always have a good fan experience. And in fact, every time we get new musicians in the band, we've got a couple touring musicians in the band now. Really, one of the most important things is how do you treat fans? We don't want assholes. You can find a lot of guys good enough to play the music, but we want somebody that's really going to be gracious and thankful for the applause and everything you get from a show, and somebody that's going to have a good fan interaction. And luckily, everybody in the band and our touring musicians, they're all great with the fans. So it's going very well.
Awesome. So I guess kind of like the uncomfortable flip side of that question is, so how does stuff like that end up getting financed, knowing that, obviously like touring costs and everything are rising now. So how do you guys manage to consistently provide something like that?
Oh, that's a good question. We tour for profit always. I see these stories about bands saying, well, we can't tour, we can't make any money. Yeah, we actually do make money on tour. We tour very lean. We don't have any road crew with us. So everybody's got to tech their own gear, and it's not as bad as it sounds. You just get up there, I set my amp up, and then we don't take a sound man. We use the local sound man, and the local sound man in Europe are great. They're all cool, and they want to do a good job. So the only person we take with us is we have our longtime tour manager, Paul, and he also sells merch, and he also drives. So, we have everybody doing a lot of different jobs, so we keep it lean. And as far as the giveaways on tour, we've been around for so long as a band that years ago we started buying everything in bulk. Like when I'd order guitar picks, I'll order 1,000. Whereas I always see these ads about, you can get picks from this so-and-so company and you can buy 80. Well, I buy a lot more because I throw a lot out. So that gets the cost way down. And the dog tags, we've been wearing them for a while. So I've got a big box of them. So that got the cost down on that. The autograph cards, I've been using the same postcard company for a few years. We had a postcard promotional campaign for our last album. So they know me as a customer, and they just gave us a great price. So really, the giveaways we do they're not that expensive. I mean, they're quality, so they're not junk, but they don't set us back a lot. We also sell our merch at a really reasonable price. We do our shirts for $20 or €20. And I know I've had other bands tell me that freaks them out, but we have a good, there's a number that people use in the industry about how much merch per person at a show, and ours is really high. So I think, and I could be wrong, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that because we have our merch priced very affordably, that people buy more. So I don't know, whatever it is, it's working for us.
That's amazing. So with all those considerations in mind, and just your experience of having done both, do you think it's easier to be a metal band nowadays or to have been a metal band back in the 80s when that was, I guess, more, at least somewhat mainstream kind of music?
It probably would have been better for most bands back then. For us, we're at the point now where we have a really good agent and a good tour manager and a good record company and a couple publicists. So just for us, it's certainly better now. But I could see for most bands, it was probably better in the 80s.
As a teenager putting the band together and everything, just for the love of music, did you expect to still be having like, still being able to like go tour around the world and play songs that you wrote, 44 years later?
Yeah, I can't say I expected it at all. It's the neighborhood we grew up in. We were so, it was a low income neighborhood, and everybody in the band's parents were enlisted military. So my dad was a sergeant raising a family of 5. So there wasn't money in our neighborhood. So we all tended to be grounded. So none of us really thought we had a chance to be rock stars or anything even close. So we always had goals, as kids, just to play some gigs, and the big goal was to release a record. So, yeah, I guess there was never an anticipation that we would be doing this, past 19 or 20. So it's really been a blessing that we're still able to do it.
That's awesome. All right. Well, before we wrap things up, is there anything you wanted to promote? Obviously, like there's the show coming up in Brooklyn later this month, but is there anything else for fans to be looking out for?
Another tour in the works. I can't say anything. I always get in trouble for having too big a mouth, so somebody's going to talk to me for even saying that. But yeah, there is another tour in the works. I can't say where or what it is, but there is one planned.
Yeah, that's all we need to hear. That's great. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being a guest on Gig Nightmares.
Oh, thank you.
I've appreciated getting to talk to you. Looking forward to meeting you in person in August. And again,
okay, thank you. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Gig Nightmares. Gig Nightmares is an independently produced podcast made possible by the support of listeners like you. If you enjoyed this week's episode, we would appreciate if you left a rating and a review for us. Gig Nightmares.